at a point in time coming off of a wild Saturday of college football. People are consistently peeking over at this board. He actually would not be my number one overall pick, nor would I bet him to be the number one overall pick. I think he got that next wave of NFL players, which is so enticing, which when you see Jaden Daniels come into the NFL and you go, I can get something like that with a guy with just as good an arm.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the game starts so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Welcome into college football today. It's time for the postgame show here on SportsGrid TV with Kasey Hudson and Dubs Anderson joining me back on this Saturday. Most importantly, there's a lot shaking and baking in college football right now. I mean, one team looks like they have it in the bag, and then the other team comes and surpasses them with some great red zone action currently going on around the league. We've got LSU taking on Texas A&M. LSU looked like they were in complete control in the first half of this game, but Texas A&M was not going out like that. 35-23, 8:09 left in the fourth quarter, and they just continue to stack. The way that the lines have shifted up on this game as well, spread-wise, I mean, from 4.5 just jumped up to 10.5 moments ago. Another game being the Sunflower Showdown between Kansas and Kansas State. Kansas with the lead by 1 point, 27-26 over Kansas State. Small shocker there, but rivalries tend to shape up differently. 12:22 left in the fourth quarter with that one. SMU versus Duke tied up 21-21, 9:02 left in the fourth. And guys, we talked about Penn State being able to rally in the second half. That's exactly what they did to overcome Wisconsin, 28-13. But that first half was all Wisconsin. But Dubs and I are going to get into all of it because there's plenty to break down in terms of the best games of the day, a number of top 25 matchups. SEC had a big day as well to see who's going to rank or change their ranking as the week prevails. So let's see when we get Dubs in here to get his thoughts on maybe his favorite game of the day. We talked a lot about a few of these matchups between Texas and Vanderbilt, Missouri and Alabama. Some games played close to the script. Other games had other things in mind, but Dubs, how's it going? How's your Saturday? And what game stole your attention today?
Kasey, good to see you. I feel like, the big theme going through week 9 from what we saw earlier today was being cover. But I think the best football and the best games are actually in the mix right now after dark, late here on a Saturday night. So as we get a couple of updates and results, we'll share that with you guys as we move through the next hour. But I think you highlighted in terms of the SEC, this battle between LSU and the Aggies. My Aggies, I mean, I tell you what, I thought they were done and dusted. Now they put up 28 points here in the second half, making a fantastic charge. But I guess the most clinical performance and the best performance, I would say, was Oregon. Quack, quack. The Ducks fire off with a big one up there in Eugene, 38-9, taking down Illinois. Not that they were, disrespected or dogs coming in for this one, but of all the big teams who were looking to stand up, I think it was Dylan Gabriel and Oregon who had the most polished performance here for you Saturday.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a great way to put that because Illinois is one of those teams that have snuck up on a few other teams so far this college season. And we saw Oregon kind of get stumped by some of these low-key teams, such as Illinois, earlier in the year. But that has not been the case. They've been very efficient. They've been very effective and consistent, more importantly, over the course of the last few weeks. And then when it comes to Gabriel's performance, I mean, this is somebody who's continuing to make a steer clear argument as to the Heisman candidate. 291 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, only 1 interception in the mix of that. But that works out nicely when you got Johnson on the other end with 102 receiving yards and 1 touchdown to help get the action going, bringing that 38-9 topping for the Oregon Ducks. Now, one other team that kind of had a great beating today, or put on a great beating, I should say, Notre Dame versus Navy, 51-14. There was a number of reasons why people found this game to be interesting, but I think it was to see how well Notre Dame can put together the pieces from top to bottom, offense, defense, and special teams, and I feel like we saw that today. You got Riley Leonard, who doesn't have to do too much, but just enough, but still is such an impactful guy as a dual-threat quarterback right now. Through the air, 178 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, no turnovers. On the ground, 83 rushing yards through 10 carries and 1 rushing touchdown. You can always count on this guy to get into the end zone for his team. What do we make of Notre Dame continuing to add a W to their column?
Yeah, fantastic performance here from the Fighting Irish coming into this one. Had to cover two touchdowns, 14.5 points. They went off as favorites, 51-14. Clinical going against Navy. And I guess the question marks to me were, what really is this Navy side? You are what your record suggests, and coming into this week undefeated, there was a lot of promise and I guess a lot of buzz in the lead up here, but it was a matter of the turnovers. 6 turnovers, that was not good enough to stay in this football game. They were beaten from the jump, and they just couldn't get back into it. So for Notre Dame, they could lean on that run game once they got off to that high-scoring first start. Love, he led the way there with that rushing attack, 102 rushing yards off the 12 carries and 2 scores there. So it was a clinical performance from Notre Dame, 51-14, absolutely serving up a smackdown, if you will, over Navy. Not to say that this season is going to be done and dusted, but this is the wake-up call. Right now, I feel like it's unprecedented, the parity we're seeing in college football. The contenders taking on the pretenders. And I thought Navy were just, they were found out to be a little missing here this afternoon.
That's a good way to put it. The contenders taking on the pretenders. I love that, and we'll borrow that. Now, speaking of pretenders, some people weren't sure how for real Ole Miss was. We saw them beat up on teams that weren't ranked. We saw them beat up on teams that were just kind of not in their league per se. But then they started to show some strides versus top-ranked teams in the nation. Most importantly, pulling off a W over the Oklahoma Sooners today, 26-14. Now, we know what Oklahoma's problem is. For the most part, they're not sure which quarterback is going to be their quarterback, even though the season's just about done. Jackson Arnold gets the tap yet again to come back into the mix. 182 passing yards, 2 tutties. Barnes on the ground, 67 rushing yards. Barnes in the air, 57 receiving yards. But it was the Rebels that had more of an answer and a concise performance today. Dart, 311 passing yards, 1 touchdown, no turnovers. Parrish didn't need to have a big game on the ground because of what Jackson Dart did in the air. And look, the Rebels look really good. Jackson Dart looks really good. What did we make of this matchup with the Sooners?
Yeah, it was a great game for you live bettors out there. They're trailing at the halftime break, 14-10. You could get a nice little number on them. They were at home. You thought the Ole Miss Rebels were absolutely going to rally. They found that offense. They found that groove in the second half. I thought Jackson Dart was fantastic, did everything that was asked of him. They didn't put up monster performance in terms of the numbers or the stat sheet, but 26-14. Oklahoma came. They came ready to play, but it wasn't enough. And now they go to 1-4 in conference play. So that's not going to be good enough for their chances going through, the back end of the business half of the season. But for Ole Miss, now 6-2, 2-2, 500 in conference play. They needed this one, survive, advance, get through to that next one. And taking a look at the schedule and who they do have on tap, it's Arkansas next week, but then it's Georgia, Florida. It gets a little tougher. So they needed this one and trying to keep the optimism for the next month of football.
Absolutely. Now, talking about another tough competition game that was on the stat sheet for the day, Nebraska taking on Ohio State, and some people wanted to see a lot more out of Ohio State. I wonder, did you feel like they got that out of this matchup? Will Howard, 221 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Of course, Judkins not with the biggest day for him, but not really necessary. Judkins on the ground, 29 rushing yards, but it was Tate through the air, 102 receiving yards through 4 receptions, helping Ohio State come out on top 21-17. Nebraska tried to crawl in there towards the end there, but it was a little too little, a little too late, right?
Yeah, it was, and for me, I guess the letdown for Ohio State, they got the win, but it should be a bit more comfortable than this. To get it by 4-point score, that's not going to be good enough. You look at their third down efficiency, that wasn't strong enough, so they just really struggled to get the rock downfield, but they did enough in that fourth quarter to just hold on and get the edge over Nebraska there. So for Ohio State, still sitting at 6-1 in terms of the Big Ten conference standing, absolutely needed that one. 3-1 in conference play. And they're still looking up top. You've got the likes of Oregon, Indiana, and Penn State who may still have those perfect records in conference play. So this was a big one for number 4 in the nation.
Absolutely. Now, before we cut to a break, just a quick update on the scores around the league or the current games taking place right now. LSU versus Texas A&M. Texas A&M with the ball, 35-23, and looking to continue to add to their points right there. 5:47 left in the fourth quarter from what I am seeing there on second and first on LSU's 29. As for the Sunflower Showdown, Kansas with the ball, still up 27-26. 9:50 left in that fourth quarter there, second and 6 at Kansas 21 as they continue to stroll, and then the deadlock continues between SMU and Duke. 21-21. So Dubs and I got a lot more to get into from this Saturday slate. Again, a lot of in-state or competitive games, a lot of rivalries, a lot of things that we have to unpack as we get close to the end of this collegiate season. Don't go anywhere. Stick with us on the other side of this quick break.
Did they talk about the play they ran at the end of the game when it was the worst flare screen I've ever seen in the history of basketball? No. See, here's what you got to do, Sherwood. I respect you. You're fantastic. But damn it, don't blame the officials. When you have a game like this that close, there's about 100 or 1,000 different things you could have done differently that could have won you the game.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
I tend to do this a lot, by the way. I do it more in baseball with the anytime home run, where I may play 4 players hit home run. I call it covering the board. You know, if I take 4 players, bet the same amount on each, I only need to hit 2 of them and I win money.
He's already got, 438 rushing yards on the season. He's looking like the old LT days where the Chargers were able to have that strong, dominant running back.
Game time decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
They lost in Neyland to Tennessee, 24-17. Again, and look, that puts Alabama in a very tough spot. I was looking at the SEC standings just before. They've got 2 losses now in conference because they lost that Vandy game.
They're still one of the top-ranked teams in the country when they lose. Everyone else drops like a brick when they lose, except for Alabama.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back into college football today. It's time for the post-game show with Kasey Hudson and Dubs Anderson running through the Saturday slate. We were just getting into some of the games while keeping you updated on the excitement continuing to roll. Now, in case you missed it right now, Texas A&M on top 35-23. driving the ball, 3rd and goal at LSU's 10. Kansas and Kansas State in a bit of a shootout here, 27-26. Kansas in the lead by that narrow margin, and then the deadlock between SMU and Duke, 21-21. Duke with the ball, 4th and 7th at SMU's 24. So we'll see how those scores continue to shake out as we run through all of the other big games of the day. Now, we were talking about Nebraska versus Ohio State. Dubs, you mentioned that probably should have been a little bit of a sexier win for Ohio State, and I couldn't agree more. I think that's why all eyes were trying to figure out how that was going to present itself. And when they were forced to toss the ball a bit more rather than run it down their opponent's throat, you saw a bit of hesitation in the adjustment. So something they got to pick up a little quicker here before the season comes to a wrap. Another game that was very exciting, Washington between Indiana. Now, the Hoosiers have been on a roll as of late, but more importantly, it was really freaking cool to see Corso rocking the throwback gear, because once upon a time, those were his sidelines. So what did we make of Indiana's 31-17 victory over the Washington Huskies?
Is this the best team in the nation? Is this the best team in the Big Ten right now? Undefeated, 5-0 in conference play. This was a fantastic performance. Washington were absolutely going to come up and roll the sleeves up and try and get down and dirty, 31-17. So I guess not as many points as I was expecting. I thought both offenses may have really got after it, 53.5. So right around that number, cover at 5.5 there. So for Indiana, I tell you what, this is a team, Kasey, in a program that just looks better the further we get into the year here through the regular season, and not a team that I would try and be excited about running up against. They're going to cause a lot of problems. And you look at the way they can get it done. It's with the run game. They really didn't have to get it vertical and get it downfield by airing it out there through, Jackson today. So I tell you what, they can slice it a couple of different ways. They continue to build momentum. And there's a lot of confidence in this locker room right now. So 31-17. Ellison was fantastic. 123 rushing yards. They really lent on that run game. 29 carries there for the young fella, included a rushing touchdown to mix as well. So I thought very impressive from number 13 in the country.
Yeah, very impressive overall. And you might be right. They could be the best team right now, because more importantly, when you look at the margin of 31-17, you're thinking that Indiana just came in and completely dominated this game. Where they did dominate was the intellect, smart plays, really great play calling, because when you look at the rest of the stats here, between offensive plays, Washington had them by 6 more offensive plays, 318 offensive or total yardage versus 312, which is what Indiana came up with. Passing yards topped them yet again, 202 to 124. On the ground, they weren't that far behind, 116 to 188. And then they were averaging 5.5 plays per yard versus 4.5 on the other side. So that just shows you where a lot of football IQ came into the mix of that matchup, which is going to get them further down the stretch and continue to stack that perfect record that they've got going on right now. So another team with a perfect record that added to the perfection, if I could say the freaking word, 37-24 was the beating that BYU put on UCF. UCF has just kind of been in a bit of a blender lately, figuring out what to do with their quarterback situation, trying not to always rely on RJ Harvey to be their workhorse to get them wins, and it's not helping. So Brown took the helm for UCF today, got some points on the board for UCF, made it a little less of an embarrassing performance, but at the end of the day, BYU stacked on top perfectly. They owned that first quarter. They owned the second quarter, outscoring them 17-10, and then just continue to roll. They only had a slow fourth quarter, which is where UCF tried to kind of catch up there. But what are we seeing out of BYU at the Cougars as well as the UCF Knights?
This is a great spot, and the odds makers weren't massive on their chances there, having to grab 2.5 going on the road, but they showed up to Mortgage Stadium absolutely ready to play. 53.5 was the total, so it skyrockets towards the overs on that side of things. I thought Jake Retzlaff was pretty strong. I know he had that fumble there, but it didn't turn out to cost him too much. But going for 228 passing yards, 16 for 24. So it was efficient football. It was a polished display there. Still undefeated for UCF. You highlighted, Kasey, a couple of question marks, but a couple of turnaround spots. Looking at what a season that could have been, it really hasn't worked out in their favor. The quarterback situation, it's not a good one. The run game was there, but I mean, you've got to fear the run before you can get it going downfield, and they just didn't have the passing game to support it. So BYU get it done in a tall order, 37-24 over UCF, and the overs comes in there. So well done if you're a BYU better. If you're big on their chances to stay undefeated, grabbing a couple of points there today.
Yeah, very likely. I saw so much hatred to their performance on the road. Nobody thought I can't say nobody, that's a little dramatic. A lot of people thought on the road, it's a donezo for them, but that was not the case. Now, we got a little under 2 minutes here, but we've got to start at least talking about Alabama versus Missouri. I will admit, I did not have Alabama covering the spread because I haven't seen enough great play from fourth quarters out of Alabama. And I'm not even counting that off of the loss versus Tennessee. But what did you see with the shutout that Alabama put on Mizzou 34-0?
One of my best bets was the overs and got nowhere near it. The Blake job of Missouri. And I guess, we thought Missouri may have been the real deal coming in to this one. They're not. They weren't. They were nowhere near good enough going against Bama. And this was sort of, a get-right spot for the Crimson Tide. They need to find a bit of confidence where they currently stand at this point in the season. Jalen Milroe, he was okay. 215 passing yards, but no passing touchdowns. The run game was pretty strong, and they just kept Missouri at arm's distance there. Drew Pine didn't have the afternoon. He was in surge for. Brady Cook came into the game, got a couple of reps, but for Missouri, back to the drawing board. Now 6-2, 500 in conference play for Alabama. I was going to say Nick Saban and Bama, but for Kalen DeBoer, Crimson Tide needed a big performance. They got it, and the defense stood tall. That was a very impressive display to keep Missouri to 0 points.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to remember this new era, but it is the Nick Saban something field now. So regardless, he still is in the mix when it comes to Alabama. Don't go anywhere. We still got plenty of college football to get into as the clock winds down for LSU versus Texas A&M. Texas A&M holds on to the lead, adding 3 to their points, 38-23. We will get to Penn State and Wisconsin, some other fun games here on the other side of the break, so stick with us on College Football Today. The postgame show, Kasey and Dubs, on the other side of this quick break.
Did they talk about the play they ran at the end of the game when it was the worst player we've ever seen in the history of basketball? No. See, here's what you got to do, Sherwood. I respect you. You're fantastic. But damn it, don't blame the officials. When you have a game like this that close, there's about 100 or 1,000 different things you could have done differently that could have won you the game.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
I tend to do this a lot, by the way. I do it more in baseball with the anytime home run, where I may play 4 players at home. I call it covering the board. If I take 4 players, bet the same amount on each, I only need to hit 2 of them and I win money.
He's already got 438 rushing yards on the season. He's looking like the old LT days where the Chargers were able to have that strong, dominant running back.
Game time decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
They lost in Neyland to Tennessee, 24-17. Again, and look, that puts Alabama in a very tough spot. I was looking at the SEC standings just before. They've got 2 losses now in conference because they lost that Vandy game.
They're still one of the top-ranked teams in the country when they lose. Everyone else drops like a brick when they lose, except for Alabama.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
You are watching college football today, the post-game show with Kasey Hudson and Doves Anderson, running through the Saturday slate and keeping you updated on the game still in action. Now LSU with the ball trying to catch up points-wise to Texas A&M that took over in the second half of this game. Texas still on top, 38-23, 2:25 left in the fourth quarter as the clock continues to wind down. They're sitting 4th and 15 at LSU's 35. Kansas gets the ball back after Kansas State has the inability to pick up some points. Clock winding down under the 4-minute mark of the fourth quarter. Kansas now 2nd and 13 at Kansas's 39, holding on to that 27-26 lead. And we are still deadlocked for SMU versus Duke. Probably looking like a potential overtime opportunity here. Duke with the ball, 4th and 9 at SMU's 38th. Now it's time for Dubs and I to continue running through all the other exciting games, talking about Mizzou versus Alabama. A good performance by Alabama. The score not being, the score is an indicator, but looking away from the score, there was a lot of cleanup that Alabama wanted to do after that loss versus Tennessee, but most importantly, it was the leader in Milroe that said he has to do better in order to lead his team better. You love that kind of accountability from your quarterback, most importantly, a potential Heisman candidate. So with that being said, 215 in the air, clean slate on the turnovers, Haynes on the ground, 79 rushing yards, Bernard matching pace with Milroe through the air, 82 receiving yards through 5 receptions. But you said that this is a good bounce-back spot for Alabama. Does this performance help possibly potentially push Milroe back a little further to the top in the Heisman conversation?
Yeah, absolutely, and won't be at the top of the odds board, but certainly right in the mix, and he's going to have a really good chance to build that stock. Next week, going against LSU, the Tigers, I should say, coming up there on the 9th of November, so they'll have a great chance there. You'll get the Sooners in the penultimate week of the regular season and finish with Auburn. So, look, for the Crimson Tide, they're going to have to win into the house there to be a factor for the college football playoffs. And for Milroe, if he can continue to do his thing, pick up a couple of style points, it's always going to be a lot easier when you got that defense to support your offense. I mean, that was a really strong effort. 3 interceptions they came up with there this afternoon. So for Bama, they need Milroe. They need Miller. That run game was fantastic. He carried 2 into the house, but absolutely, this can be the shot of confidence. And as we've seen all season long, it's a wide open market. Still for the national championship, but even more so for the Heisman conversation, because a couple of our standout players are really coming out of some cupcake schedules. So once it's all said and done, the voters are going to be thinking, well, if we've got the star quarterback from Alabama who's put up some fantastic numbers, taking them to the college football playoffs, he's going to be right in the mix. So absolutely, this is only going to buoy Milroe's chances moving through the back half of the year.
Absolutely. And as you kind of mentioned, we'll probably still see a little bit of shuffling here as we gear closer towards that November 30th date. But another guy who's been in the conversation when it comes to the Heisman chit-chat is one Quinn Ewers, who made his return just a few weeks ago and didn't really look all himself, but again, returning from oblique injury. Moving past that, we saw him be a little rattled versus Georgia, but then they decided to continue with him on the other side of halftime, which I thought was really good for his mental state. Today, we saw better in terms of what his key performance is and what he does well, but 2 turnovers is very much not going to keep you that high in the Heisman conversation. What did you see out of Texas pulling off the victory over Vanderbilt today, 27-24? A nice narrow win there. Ewers with 288 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, but 2 interceptions. It could be very costly in this conversation.
Yeah, it doesn't really help the stock, and unfortunately, sometimes it's out of the quarterback's control. I know the ball's going to be out of their hands, but sometimes you just get that tip. It finds its way into the defense's grasp, and obviously 2 interceptions still going to come up there on the box score. But I thought this first half was one of the better performances we've seen from Quinn Ewers, especially since coming from returning off that injury. And look, Steve Sarkisian, he's told us before the game coming in for this one earlier today, he told us after the game, this is the quarterback for the Longhorns to give them the best chance moving through. I thought Quinn Ewers absolutely did enough to keep that starting job and keep himself right in the mix there for the Heisman market. The stats, obviously not going to tell us the full picture, but I thought he played with a lot of confidence early in this game. And it cannot be easy going against a team like Vandy, who have proven they're capable of upsetting the best in the nation, and especially when you got another star young quarterback who's sitting over there by the Gatorade cooler. So I thought Quinn Ewers, he stepped up, he led this team 27-24. It was a close one. 16.5 is what they went off as favorites. They didn't get the cover, but just to win and keep their season moving in the right direction. at 6-2, it would have looked a lot differently if they didn't get that win here today.
Absolutely. Well, this and so much more, especially more Heisman conversation on the other side of this quick break. And it will not just be Dubs, Anderson, and myself. Rich Simonello will be joining us on the other side.
Did they talk about the play they ran at the end of the game when it was the worst flare screen I've ever seen in the history of basketball? No. See, here's what you got to do, Sherwood. I respect you. You're fantastic. But damn it, don't blame the officials. When you have a game like that close, there's about 100 or 1,000 different things you could have done differently that could have won you the game.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
I tend to do this a lot, by the way. I do it more in baseball, but the anytime home run, where I may play 4 players at home. I call it covering the board. You know, if I take 4 players, bet the same amount on each, I only need to hit 2 of them and I win money.
He's already got, 438 rushing yards on the season. He's looking like the old LT days where the Chargers were able to have that strong, dominant running back.
Game time decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
They lost in Neyland to Tennessee, 24-17. Again, and look, that puts Alabama in a very tough spot. I was looking at the SEC standings just before. They've got 2 losses now in conference because they lost that Vandy game.
They're still one of the top-ranked teams in the country when they lose. Everyone else drops like a brick when they lose, except for Alabama.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back into college football today here on SportsGrid TV. Kasey Hudson, Dubs Anderson, and now Rich Simonello joining us to run through the Saturday slate, but we also have a big game final in the books. LSU versus Texas A&M is a wrap, and Texas A&M made their comeback clear by topping this team 38-23, closing out the match. So I can't wait to run through that one with these 2 gentlemen right here. Kansas versus Kansas State, still holding on there, and Kansas State takes the lead 29-27 as the clock winds down. 142 is what I'm seeing in the 4th quarter here. The deadlock continues, or the Tango Showdown, whatever you want to call it, between SMU and Duke. 21-21 seconds left on the clock as we see what shakes up there. But Rich, first and foremost, we were talking about it during the break, but let's let the audience know, what's the game that caught your eye this weekend?
Yeah, another great slate of games. I mean, week 9 is going so fast. I tend to cherish every one of these Saturdays from start to finish. And we had to wait till the nighttime to see what I thought was the best performance from a team perspective. Penn State really blew me away tonight, guys. Tough spot going into Madison on the road at Wisconsin. Wisconsin last 3 games beat their opponents by a combined score of 117-16. So they were getting it done offensively and defensively. Penn State, before halftime, loses their quarterback, Drew Aller, and they just dominate the second half and walk away with a 28-13 victory over the Badgers. It's a great way to head into week 10. Next week, it's Penn State against Ohio State, massive showdown in the Big Ten. So what I really liked, guys, was the preparation of the backup quarterback, Bo Pribula, who was used in the past, mostly just as a run option type quarterback. in this system, I thought he looked great. So kudos to that entire coaching staff for having him ready when Aller went down. So Penn State, for me, the big winner so far on Saturday in Week 9.
Rich, taking a look at the Big Ten standings, 3 teams remain undefeated: Indiana, Oregon, and Penn State. Is there much separation between the Nittany Lions and the Ducks, and also up there with Indiana?
Yeah, it's a good question, Dubs. I think Oregon right now, the class of the conference, big win today, 38-9 over Illinois. Illinois was number 20 in the country, Fighting Illini, having a great season under Brett Bielema, getting it done offensively and defensively. But offensively, they couldn't do anything at Outson Stadium today. So Oregon continues to be undefeated. Indiana, without their starting quarterback, Curtis Rourke, hand injury, Taven Jackson takes over, did just enough. But what I liked about Indiana, guys, today is the defense got in the act. First touchdown for the Hoosiers today, D'Angelo Pons on a 67-yard pick six. So Indiana beginning to look like a total product on both sides of the ball. And then here's Penn State. Penn State has a chance to really sucker punch Ohio State, because I'm sure you guys watched the 12 o'clock game. The Buckeyes looked lethargic coming out of their bye week. They had to rally late against Nebraska. Nebraska lost last week 56-7 to Indiana. So what's going on with Ohio State? 2 weeks ago, they lose to Oregon. Bye week, they come out of the bye. And man, I did not think they looked like a top 5 team today.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, I should say, because Dubs and I were talking about it beforehand, and at least from what I thought I saw is that they're so used to being able to beat out their competition by just dominating the run game. And when they had to make the adjustment to steer away from their run game today, it felt like it took them a minute to get there, even though the connections through the air seemed to find their way. But how's that going to stack when it comes to Howard and his ranking when it comes to the Heisman? And more importantly, if the run game's not available to them, can we see them pull off more W's down the stretch here?
And it really should be. I mean, you have Chip Kelly running the offense. He's one of the forefathers of the RPO, the zone read option offense. He loves athletic quarterbacks, power running games. They have the best running back room in the entire country with Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson. There's absolutely no reason. Some injury problems on the offensive line didn't help this weekend, but no reason for them not to be running the ball more effectively. So to your question, Kasey, yeah, they have to run the ball because Will Howard's a good quarterback. I think he's a talented college quarterback. I'm not sure he's a next level quarterback. I don't think he has that kind of arm talent. He needs support in the running game. And next week is in Happy Valley. It's going to be a wild scene. Penn State's defense is extraordinarily athletic. They go from sideline to sideline as well as anyone in the country. So that could be a tough test for Ohio State. Will Ohio State go down for a second time, or will it be last week, Georgia, Texas, where a team like Georgia rises up and wins on the road? That'll be the marquee game of Week 10.
Rich, with the SEC, a lot of one-loss teams, if you will, and we just had a fantastic matchup wrapping up there. LSU, the Tigers, going in to Kyle Field to take on Texas A&M. The Aggies prevail 38-23 in a close one. They were behind 17-7 at the halftime break. What was the key to the turnaround in this second half?
Yeah, I'm so happy you brought this up because I've been praising Penn State, and shame on me if I don't mention Texas A&M in one of these segments, because the Aggies, huge winners this weekend as well. I mean, that was probably the biggest game of the weekend, was the one you just mentioned, Kyle Field, LSU, Texas A&M, two teams that entered the weekend on 6-game winning streaks. To me, the difference is Mike Elko, all season long, first-year coach, just a tremendous difference from Jimbo Fisher in the past to Elko, but also his guts to go to Marcel Reed midway through that game. Connor Wegman, the quarterback, didn't have it. He goes to the bench to Marcel Reed, who is, by the way, a true freshman. You're talking about a teenager in a game of this magnitude against LSU and Brian Kelly. And all Marcel Reed did was lead the Aggies to 4 consecutive touchdown drives, 3 of which he finished with touchdowns using his legs. So Elko's guts and confidence in his young quarterback to pull the trigger and make that move, that was coaching genius. And now we have Texas A&M sitting at 7-1, 14th in the country before the weekend. I think they'll slide into the top 10 once we get to tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon when the polls come out. So Texas A&M firmly in the hunt for an SEC title and a playoff spot. And boy, that is just the complete opposite of what we saw from this team over the last couple of years under Jimbo Fisher.
Oh my! I've seen a lot of Jimbo Fisher games, but that was during FSU and a change of times. But kind of sticking with the top 10 of the SEC, you got Alabama who pulls off a clean shutout today, 34-0. And I'll just say this: I thought Mizzou was going to bring a stronger performance. I know they were down QB1. I know they were down their top running back. But regardless, I thought that their defense and their formidability to hold off their opponent was going to play a larger role. What did we learn about Alabama today in their sixth positioning in the SEC?
To me, to be honest, not enough. I mean, I'm still very suspicious about Alabama. They've been too schizophrenic throughout the season since halftime of the Georgia game. You know, what are we going to get from Alabama? We don't really know. So Mizzou down Brady Cook. Brady Cook played some, but then was done for the game. You mentioned the running back. Nate Noel was out. Missouri really hasn't been the team I thought they would be this year. You know, they've flirted with disaster against schools like Boston College. No disrespect to Vandy. Vandy's been amazing, but almost lost that game to Vandy. Had to rally last week against Auburn. Auburn's one of the worst teams in the SEC. So, you know, Mizzou is not the team I thought they'd be heading into the season, and down key players. Alabama still has to bring it against a better opponent. So a lot left to be learned about this team before we anoint them as a serious playoff threat.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like that's been the theme of Alabama, just not knowing what you're going to get from them until the game is a wrap. Plenty for us to still get to on the other side of this upcoming break, but more importantly, Kansas State holding on to their lead 29-27. Kansas with the ball, a minute left in the fourth quarter. And then SMU and Duke, no surprise here, going into overtime. So we'll keep you up to date on all the scores going on around the nation at the moment as we continue to unpack the stats and lines that prevailed today in the Saturday football matchup. Stick with us here on SportsGrid TV.
Did they talk about the play they ran at the end of the game when it was the worst flare screen I've ever seen in the history of basketball? No. See, here's what you got to do, Sherwood. I respect you. You're fantastic. But damn it, don't blame the officials. When you have a game like this, that close, there's about 100 or 1,000 different things you could have done differently that could have won you the game.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
I tend to do this a lot, by the way. I do it more in baseball, but the anytime home run, where I may play 4 players hit home run. I call it covering the board. You know, if I take 4 players, bet the same amount on each, I only need to hit 2 of them and I win money.
He's already got, 438 rushing yards on the season. He's looking like the old LT days where the Chargers were able to have that strong, dominant running back.
Game time decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
They lost in Neyland to Tennessee, 24-17. Again, and look, that puts Alabama in a very tough spot. I was looking at the SEC standings just before. They've got 2 losses now in conference because they lost that Vandy game.
They're still one of the top-ranked teams in the country when they lose. Everyone else drops like a brick when they lose, except for Alabama.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
back at it with college football today, the post-game show with Kasey Hudson, Rich Manello, and Dubs Anderson. And we've got some updates for you guys. SMU and Duke want to play football all night long, I'll tell you that. SMU on top 28-27, the scoring picking up pretty quickly as OT went underway. Kansas State finds a way to rally in the fourth quarter yet again, pulling off the victory 29-27. And then if you missed it moments ago, 38-23 was the victory for Texas A&M over LSU. I feel like we should kind of jump to that for just a second because Rich, you and I were talking about LSU last week. You were giving us some respect to his play and his ability to kind of help carry his team, which I saw a lot of that in the first half there. But more importantly, kind of where the defense or where things fell apart for LSU versus Texas A&M, because it was all LSU up until that third quarter, at least in my personal opinion.
Yeah, rough night for Garrett Nussmeier when it comes to NFL draft grade. 3 picks tonight, Kasey. Some poor decision-making late. Still believe in him in terms of being an NFL quarterback and possibly a day 1 or day 2 draft pick. But tonight is not the film that he'll be sending to NFL scouts and GMs. For me, this was just an inability to adjust to the different style of quarterback. Connor Wegman, more of a pocket passer, good athlete, more of a pocket passer. Marcel Reed, still developing as a passer, but extremely athletic outside of the pocket. We saw that time and time again in the second half. Mike Elko, again, he makes that move. LSU and defensive coordinator Blake Baker unable to adjust, unable to stop both Marcel Reed and Le'Veon Moss, and that was really the difference in the game. And again, this to me, whether it's Mike Elko in College Station or Kurt Signetti at Indiana, it really speaks to how one key coaching change could make a world of difference for a program. Those two schools now combined 15-1, neither bowled last year. So when we get to the offseason and we start talking about coaching carousel, you could be, if you're a fan of a program, you could be one coaching change, especially a coach who knows how to work the portal, from going from maybe 4-8 to 8-4 a year later.
Rich, you mentioned carousel. I feel like that's how it's been with the Heisman market all season long. And Dylan Gabriel put up a masterclass for Oregon, 38-9 over Illinois earlier today. Gabriel goes for 291 passing yards, another 3 touchdowns, and he is now the shortest price to take out the Heisman at plus 185. But if you look at that market, it still tells us it is a wide open affair with a handful of games left. With the likes of a Cam Ward, Jeanty sort of make in to that margin, or have you seen enough that Dylan Gabriel is, yes, squarely cemented as the best quarterback in the nation?
I think he has the lowest floor right now, Dubs. I think with the Ohio State game behind him, it's kind of built in. If you look at the schedule, Oregon's going to score north of 30, 35 points. They did it again today with 38. You're going to get 2 or 3 touchdowns out of Dylan Gabriel. Voters know who he is. This is his 6th year, began his career at UCF, moved on last year to Oklahoma, now at Oregon. So he's not sneaking up on anyone. Voters know his resume. Great kid. I think he's an easy to vote for kind of player, especially as long as Oregon is in the mix for a national championship. So he's a favorite for good reason. Ashton Jeanty, I think it's going to be a matter of taste. No marquee games left. UNLV was maybe the biggest one left on Friday night, played well, $128 and a touchdown. He's going to put up monster numbers, going to hit 2,000 yards. I think voters are going to shy away just because of the schedule. The interesting one for me is Cam Ward. Love his game. Love the impact that he's had for Miami. We've talked for years. Is the U back? Is this the year? Are they going to turn the corner? Well, Cam Ward is the reason why they're beginning to do that. And they can talk about an ACC championship. The one caveat, guys, for me is, what's the big game? What's the Heisman moment opportunity for Cam Ward moving forward? I think his best shot is going to be if Clemson keeps winning, and it's Miami Clemson. Clemson is a, blue blood. They're a national known program. I think it's got to be Miami Clemson in the ACC title game. I think that's where he could win more voters.
That's such a good point. I think we did talk about that as well. Where's the Titan going to come in that helps you show that you are the best of the best, or you are the best in the nation? earning that trophy. Kind of speaking on that a little bit more, Ward finished off today's matchup versus FSU, 208 passing yards. But what he does so well as a leader, or what this team does so well, them being Miami, is the balanced attack opportunities they have. Because 200 yards might be low for Ward, but they still found efficiency in their play versus FSU, 36-14. Martinez on the ground, 148 rushing yards for 2 touchdowns. Insane. And then they have a bit of a carousel when it comes to their receiving room in terms of who's going to be their top target of the day. Today it was Horton with 65 receiving yards through 6 receptions. So with those numbers and just seeing the versatility and their ability to attack their opponent, is that going to make for a case for Ward per se, even though he's in the ACC and it's kind of looked at as a weaker situation at the moment?
Yeah, listen, I think it helps if you're coming out of the SEC or the Big Ten. I mean, traditionally, voters are going to look and say you're playing the best schedule, you're playing in one of the 2 top conferences. That automatically helps. But for context, I think voters, the majority of voters, are savvy enough to realize how long it's been since Miami has been relevant on the national scene. Competing for titles of any kind, whether that's a conference title or a national championship. And this is the one guy who's been the difference maker. It's not necessarily Mario Cristobal. It's not Damian Martinez in the backfield or any other transfer portal pickups. Getting Cam Ward has thrust Miami back to a point where we could say they're a legit top 10 team. That, to me, more than numbers, is going to stand out for voters, especially this season, guys, because there's not an obvious choice. Nobody's running away with this. And I don't know if we're going to get a November surprise. We've had that in the past where a guy gets hot at the right time, leads his team to a title. I don't see that guy right now coming out of nowhere. So the Gabriels, the Cam Wards, the Ginties, maybe Travis Hunter at Colorado. Those are the favorites for good reason right now.
Yeah, and if anything, this college theme might be who could be the most consistent, because we've seen great play, but we've seen a lot of inconsistency from a number of names and teams. Colorado getting ready to head to halftime versus Cincinnati, up top 17-14. So one more rally here at College Football Today, the post-game show. Don't go anywhere. Stick with us here on SportsGrid TV. Follow at SportsGrid over at SportsGrid on X, and we'll catch you on the other side of this break.
Did they talk about the play they ran at the end of the game when it was the worst flare screen I've ever seen in the history of basketball? No. See, here's what you got to do, Sherwood. I respect you. You're fantastic. But damn it, don't blame the officials. When you have a game like this that close, there's about 100 or 1,000 different things you could have done differently that could have won you the game.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
I tend to do this a lot, by the way. I do it more in baseball, but the anytime home run, where I may play 4 players hit home run. I call it covering the board. You know, if I take 4 players, bet the same amount on each, I only need to hit 2 of them and I win money.
He's already got, 438 rushing yards on the season. He's looking like the old LT days where the Chargers were able to have that strong, dominant running back.
Game time decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
They lost in Neyland to Tennessee, 24-17. Again, and look, that puts Alabama in a very tough spot. I was looking at the SEC standings just before. They've got 2 losses now in conference because they lost that Vandy game.
They're still one of the top-ranked teams in the country when they lose. Everyone else drops like a brick when they lose, except for Alabama.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
One more rally here on college football today. Post-game on SportsGrid TV, Kasey Hudson, Dubs Anderson, and Rich Cerminello to run you through the Saturday slate. Another final in the books. If you didn't catch it earlier, SMU pulls this one off 28-27 over Duke in overtime. Kansas State pulls it off 29-27 over Kansas in the Sunflower Showdown. And then Texas A&M 38-23 over LSU, having a big second half to pull off the victory. I've mentioned this a number of times, a lot of great games, but I got a chance to ask Dubs about it. Rich, I have a feeling where you might be leaning in terms of your favorite game of the day, but what was probably the most important game to gauge today on this Saturday slate?
Can I give you two?
Yes.
I feel like the kid who's asking for an extra Snickers bar on Halloween.
It's October still, so you're good.
Yeah, we have another few days before Halloween, right? So I'll go Penn State and Texas A&M. Those were two of the biggest games of the weekend. Penn State beating Wisconsin in Madison after losing their quarterback Drew Aller is a big deal heading into next weekend. Lots of momentum for Week 10 against Ohio State, and then A&M just keeps rolling. That's 7 consecutive wins. They stop a 6-game winning streak of LSU. The home crowd is fired up. They might have a quarterback controversy, but that comes with the territory after Marcel Reed gets inserted into the lineup. Texas A&M, now a legitimate threat, especially with a more watered-down SEC, legitimate threat to win that conference. One more quickie, a little bonus one. How about ND? I mean, how quickly have we forgotten that Northern Illinois loss? They pound Navy. Group of 5 leader now is clearly Boise State as Navy suffers their first loss of the season.
Wide open affair. Georgia up top of the odds board now, plus 330 to take out the national championship. Oregon plus 470. Ohio State at plus 480. At this point, where we're catching up with Week 9 almost in the books, Rich, who's the team to watch out for? If you're looking outside the top 3 betting choices, who's a team that's maybe got that DNA to make a bit of a push-off run?
You know, I remember saying, Dubs, after the opening weekend, because everybody was throwing dirt on Clemson, just be careful at this point because, you know, Clemson was ill-prepared for Georgia in the opener, and they lost. They folded in the second half. But Clemson has a lot of talent, and finally the light went on for Cade Klubnik and that offense under Garrett Riley, their young offensive coordinator. Clemson is scoring points. Clemson finally has talented receivers. They're young but very gifted. And defense has never been a problem for Clemson. So you mentioned DNA, Dubs. Dabo Swinney has the DNA for winning championships. I still think they're the favorite in the ACC. I still think they'll beat Miami to win an ACC title and get to the playoffs. So if you want to look outside of those 3 or 4 top favorites, Clemson is just lurking out there and getting better by week this week, but getting better and better week after week.
I like the lurking perspective. Okay, gentlemen, I'm going to put you both in the hot seat before we go here tonight. Rich, I'll start with you. Who do you want to see in the national championship?
I would take Oregon versus the SEC champ. How about Oregon versus Georgia? Kirby Smart versus his pupil, Dan Lanning. That's the game I'd like to see.
All right, Dubs, hot seat.
I'm just going to get my Aggies jersey out. I should have worn it. I think they're the Smoky of the SEC. I thought they're fantastic. The coaching adjustments we saw earlier today, fantastic. They've got the 2 quarterbacks to choose from. A spoil of riches, if you will. So a bit of a home play, bit of a price play for any bettors who are still looking for a bit of a flyer. Give me the Aggies outside the top of the board.
Wow, okay. Do we think Texas was a little overrated, or do they claw their way back into an opportunity, Rich?
Yeah, no, listen, I have a lot of respect for Texas and Steve Sarkisian. I mean, the loss to Georgia, you know, it's Georgia, so that they can regroup from that. Today was interesting. You know, they had to really scrap and claw to beat Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, we've seen what they could do against the likes of Alabama. That game was in Nashville. So, no, I'm still high on Texas. I think Texas has a legitimate shot to get hot, regroup. Quinn Ewers has got to stop throwing picks. But, I'm still backing Texas at this point.
Yeah, very, very cool. Well, Week 9 just about behind us, but more importantly, November 30th getting very, very close and very near. Rich and Dubs, thank you so much for the post-game participation. But more importantly, fans, make sure you're following SportsGrid over at SportsGrid on X. SportsGrid TV on Instagram to keep up with all of the coverage that we have for college football, NFL, and so much more. But more importantly, with the college football season getting ready to close out here, you're going to want to stick with us on College Football Today. But until next week, guys, I hope everybody has a safe